Okie dokie, so in this video I want to show you how to cast on your stitches using a pair of circular needles. Now I'm showing you this because in my recent kit that I'm just about to release, I'm showing you or teaching you how to knit a snood or a cowl. Now don't judge the quality of this one because I haven't woven in the ends yet and I haven't blocked it out, so that's why it's still a little bit floppy. But it is far easier to knit this on circular needles, because if you knit it with two flat needles, you have to then sew up a rather large seam, whereas this one, it is just ready to go straight away. So that's why I wanted to introduce circular knitting, and it's such a great way to develop your knitting skills. So for this demonstration, I'm going to be using some chunky yarn, which is a little bit different. No, I did not match my nails to the colour, it just happened to be that way. And then I'm also going to be using some circular knitting needles. Now, traditionally, I normally knit with what I teach. No, that's not right. I knit with what I have in my kits. But I wanted to do this tutorial with chunky needles just because I'm hoping it will improve the quality of the video and that you'll be able to see the instructions far clearer. So hence why I've got chunky and I've got circular. The difference between a circular knitting needle and single knitting needles is the fact that these are connected through this cable here. Okay, they are connected, they cannot come apart. So that's why it's great if you want to do some kind of like seamless knitting. And what I mean by seamless knitting is you don't need to sew up any ends in order to finish up your product. You need to weave in ends, but you shouldn't need to do any sewing. With my kit, I'm going to have 4mm needles with a 40cm cable, which is what this is. It's very long. It's just a plastic cable, it's just a polymer, and it's attached to the ends through magic, but also what I assume is glue and then a little bit of pressure. Because you'll notice that with these needles, it's a 6mm needle, so the needle itself is 6mm, but as we get to the end, it starts to taper off, and that means it starts to get a little bit smaller, it starts to get thinner, so that the cable is always going to be, I can't remember now, I think it's 3mm or 2mm, no, 3mm in diameter, maybe a 2.5 now I'm saying that out loud, but it just means transferring your stitches is going to be a lot easier. So we've got our needles, we've got our yarn. The first thing we need to do is a slip knot. So if you already know how to do that, fantastic. But if you're not too sure, I'm going to show you now. So here's how to make a slip knot. I'm going to hold my yarn in between my fingers on my hand. So thumb, index finger, middle finger, ring finger. Now I'm using my left hand because I'm right-handed. I'm then going to pull the yarn to create a lovely V. And I'm going to twist it clockwise almost. And now I've got a strand of yarn that's underneath and a strand of yarn that's above. Okay, what I'm now going to do is I'm going to use my right hand and I'm going to pinch the strand that is beneath, and then I'm going to pull, and that's how you create your slip knot. You might need to watch that a million more times, and that is absolutely fine. But once we've got our slip knot, we're going to tighten it onto our needle. Not so tight that it can't move. We want to move it so it's tight enough so it can move with ease when I lift it up and down. So far, that's what we're after. Now we just need to know some technical jargon because it's going to help us on this little journey. So I said I've got my ball of yarn. Yay. I've now got two yarn ends though. The end of the yarn that is still connected to the ball itself is called the yarn end. And then the end that is just dangling here with nothing to do is called the tail end because it looks like a tail. And normally you would just weave this in, or if you were doing a piece of work that had a seam in it and you had to sew it, you could use this as well. With ours, we're just going to weave it in, so I'm just going to leave it there. So that's the jargon for the yarn. Now let's talk about the jargon for the knitting needles. I have two needles. I am right-handed. All of the work that I'm going to be doing, all the knitting, is going to be done with the right needle, which is why I'm going to call it the working needle. The left needle is just going to hold my stitches, which is why I'm going to call it the holding needle. So working needle, holding needle, working needle, holding needle. Let's get going. We're going to cast on these stitches for these. I'm going to cast it on for my snood, so I'm going to make sure that my stitches aren't too tight, and I'm going to try and keep the cable out of view as much as possible, but it's really quite hard. So what I'm going to do, the first thing is, I'm going to take the tail end and I'm going to put it in between my two fingers, and I'm going to hold the tail end against the needle. So I'm going to zoom in and show you that. I'm holding it against the needle, look, because what I want to do with my working needle, I want to feed it underneath that slip knot that I've hooked on my needle, on my holding needle, sorry, like so. It's underneath. And now I'm going to take my yarn end of yarn. I'm going to wrap it around the working needle, going from the back of the needle over to the front. So again, that's going from the back of the needle to the front. And now this yarn that I've just wrapped round, I now want to pull it underneath this stitch to create another slip knot. So to do that, I'm going to hold onto the yarn. I'm not going to let it go. I'm going to put my index finger at the top, and I'm very gently going to pull the needle down. And as I pull the needle down, see that yarn? It's coming through, it's through, it's through. I have a new slip knot. I have a brand new slip knot that I'm now going to hook onto my holding needle, and I'm going to pull, and that is now going to be my stitch. The slip knot we're also going to call a stitch. So we're going to have stitch 1 and stitch 2. I'm going to cast on maybe 20. Excellent. So now let's cast on another one. I'm still going to hold on to this tail for a moment, but now I'm going to place my working needle underneath the stitch I've just added, so underneath this stitch here. And I know I've done that because when I feed the needle through, I can see 2 bars of yarn going underneath it, going over it, sorry. So if I could only see 1 bar of yarn, I've not gone underneath the stitch, I've gone through. We want to go underneath, so I need to see 2 bars or 2 strands of yarn going over that needle. I'm going to take my working yarn, wrap it around, going from the back to the front, holding onto the yarn, index finger at the top, and then very carefully we're going to pull the needle down and bring that yarn through to create another slip knot, which we're going to put onto our holder needle, and this is now going to be known as another stitch. So now I have 3 stitches. Now, if you are brand new to knitting, like absolutely brand new, you are going to make so many mistakes, and I cannot tell you how common and how easy that is to do. So please be kind to yourself. Please have a bit of perseverance. If it's really annoying you that much, pop it down, get a cup of tea, but come back to it. Like, think, if you know how to drive a car, how long did that take you? Like, honestly, it is just the same, because you've got to use your brain, and it's a lot of multitasking. So yeah, be patient with yourself. But this is how we cast on. We go underneath, so you can see those 2 bars. 2 bars there. Look, yes, I know my skin around my nails is awful. I'm also a DT teacher, so my hands are always dry. Bring the yarn underneath. Now, a trick with bringing the yarn underneath is, I've already said it, but I'm going to say it again. Don't let go of the yarn end of your yarn. Don't let go of it. You want to hold on to it at all times, just so you're not strangling it, but it's not just flopping down, because as soon as you go to move the needle, look, it's just going to fall off. So you want to hold on to the yarn end. And then you also want to keep your index finger at the top of the needle, because it just helps when you bring it down. Now, you may have noticed my index finger starts to move downwards, but that's because, not to sound rude, I know what I'm doing and I know how to bring it through. But I would encourage you to try and keep it to the top, because as you're pushing it underneath, look, the yarn has nowhere to go but underneath that stitch. So there we go. So I said I was going to do 20. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've done 7. So I'm just going to keep going until I've done 20. So you can watch, and you can see what I'm doing. Another tip, actually, completely forgot about this one. I didn't realise I did this until quite recently. When I'm casting on, what I do is I actually lift up the stitch on the holding needle. So the last stitch I've added, I lift it up because it's actually easier to then feed your needle underneath. Now, I never knew I was doing this until I happened to be filming a tutorial for something else, and I realised that's what I do. So it just helps you to bring that needle underneath your stitch. There we go. So that'll be 8, I think. Okay, so I should now have 30. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22, 24, 26, 28, 30. Excellent. Okay, right. I've now cast on my stitches. I'm going to start knitting them. I'm actually going to do a rib stitch first, but the whole point of knitting in the round or knitting on circular needles is that you are literally knitting a circle or a tube. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to split these stitches in half, and I'm going to feed the cable through. So I'm going to go 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. I am going to do an odd number because I've got 30 stitches. So I'm going to bring the stitches onto the cable, look. So the needles are dangling down there, and on the cable, and I'm just going to pinch and feed them, whoop, down the cable, and I'm going to push them onto my 2 separate needles like so. So now, if I hold it there, I've now got 15 needles on one side, on one needle, and 15 stitches on the other. That's actually a lie. I've got 14 and I've got 16. But the thing you've got to be really, really careful of when you're doing this, you do not want to twist your stitches. So at the bottom of the stitches here, you can see this lovely like chain, almost like a caterpillar with all its little legs. You don't want to twist that. So see how mine looks like it's literally just carrying over? Now, if you twist it by accident, which I'm going to try and do now. There you go. Oh, get out the way, Jan. There you go. If you twist it by accident, it will literally look twisted. And it just means that you're going to have a twist in your knitting. Which is just, it could just be really irritating. So just make sure that when you transfer those stitches, so they're now evenly on both needles, kind of, you don't twist. You don't twist. And again, you're going to twist them. It's going to happen, but you will learn from it. I still do it, and I've been doing this a long old time. Now what I want to do, because I actually want to start knitting, I need my working needle to be in my right hand. And my yarn end is going to be always with my working needle. So I actually need to swap them around slowly. So now I've got my working needle in my right hand and my holding needle in my left hand. So yeah, really fiddly. If I try and zoom out, there you go, look. Really, really fiddly there. But I don't have a twist. Zoom in. No twist. There you go. And you've also got to make sure that your lovely little caterpillar also doesn't twist. So what I mean by that is if we focus on this one here, oh God, go out of the way, cable. If we focus on this one here, I'm fighting with the cable. Sometimes what can happen as well is you accidentally twist them round like so. See how your caterpillar is now climbing up the needle by twisting around it? If you start knitting like that, it means you're going to have a twist in your work. So you've got to make sure that your lovely little caterpillar doesn't have any twists or kinks in it, okay? So all the little stitches are like the little legs, and the lovely little row is like its back. So caterpillars are really, really flexible, in case you didn't know. Now the final thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my tail end is also at the back of my needle, like my yarn end, so they now look like this. Okay, so we've now casted on. Now it's going to be the fun part. Now we're actually going to start knitting them. And I'm going to do one more thing, and it's going to shock you, because at the moment I can't knit because of this bit here. I'm stuck, okay? So with my working needle, I'm going to pull my working needle, and I'm going to pull, 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 pull. So now my stitches are just on the cable. They are not on the needle. Needle, cable, needle, cable. And I know you're thinking, oh my God, Heather, that looks madness. It is madness. You don't need that much of a gap. I was being a bit excessive there. I'm just going to keep them off the needle so that basically I can knit these stitches here. I've still got no twist. I know my caterpillar looks a little bit bent, but I've still got no twist to it. It's just as the cable twists, the back of the caterpillar tends to twist as well. So you just got to be careful with that. But what I'm going to do now is I'm holding my holding needle in my left hand. I'm checking that my stitches are straight and there's no kinks. There are no kinks. I know you've got to really hold on to them. You're wrestling them. And I'm actually going to be doing a rib stitch for my snood. So I'm going to knit the first 2 stitches. And to knit the first 2 stitches, I'm going to make sure that this yarn is going where I want it, you pesky yarn, you. To knit the first 2 stitches, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my needle through that stitch. So do you remember how earlier we were going underneath by going underneath the 2 bars? Now we're going through, so we only want to see 1. Okay, so I've gone through. I'm going to take my yarn end, which is being a pesky little rabbit. Come here, you bum. I'm going to take my yarn end. I'm going to wrap it around the needle, and I'm going to pull it very tight because I don't want a gap in between my stitch on my cable and my stitch that I'm about to put on my working needle. So I'm pulling it really quite tight here, and then I'm going to bring that stitch underneath to create a new one, like so. I don't need this one anymore, so I'm going to kick it off. So that is my first stitch knit, and I'm going to go straight for the second one, but bearing in mind, look, see how we're starting to get a gap? Pull. Pull, pull, pull. You want to keep it as tight as you can so you don't get much of a gap. Now, you will get a gap. It's going to happen. Accept it now. You will get a tiny gap. But that's where this bad boy comes in. That's where the tail comes in, because we can use the tail to sew that gap together. So don't worry. You just want to keep the gap as small as possible. And then we knit the second stitch. Now, if you're going, oh my God, Heather, I don't know how to knit. You're going way too fast. Oh my God, slow down. You're right. I'm going to knit all of these stitches. I'll do ribbing next. So I just knit the second stitch. I was sneaky, but I did it. Once you knit the second stitch, it's going to get a bit easier because you'll be able to loosen your grip ever so slightly, but I've still got quite a tight pull on that yarn. And then I'm going to wrap the yarn around. Just like with casting on, you go from the back of the needle to the front, and then we bring the yarn we just wrapped around underneath that stitch. So now I've got a new stitch on my working needle, old on my holding needle. I'm going to kick it off because the idea is we're transferring the stitches, we're not adding any. So that's why we have to kick it off the holding needle. So wrap it round, still hold on to it, don't let it go. Finger at the top, pull it through and lift it off. So that is how we do our knitting. Wrap it around, finger at the top, pull it through, kick it off. And those are our first row of stitch right there. See those little V's? I know the tail's in the way. Get out of the way, you pesky tail. Come here, tail. There we go. Those little V's are our first stitch. Okay? I know, ignore my fingers, ignore my nails, okay? There's no point me seeing in manicurists because honestly, they'll just go back to the way they are now. Trust me, I've tried. But if they really offend you, I am very, very, very sorry. Continue knitting and knitting. Okay, so this is currently the knit stitch. Now I'm gonna do 2 birds, 1 stone. Well, actually no, technically 3, because I've shown you how to cast on. Now I'm showing you how to knit. I'm now going to show you how to purl your stitches. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to knit this whole round first. I'm going to knit this whole round first because we're getting up to the point of the cable. Dun dun dun. We're about to run out of stitches. Now I have started to loosen the tension or the tightness that I'm holding my yarn because I don't need it to be massively tight anymore. The only reason I had it so tight was so that I could have a small gap. I know it looks like nothing now, like look at it. It looks like yarn origami, but it's going to become really clear in a moment. There we go. And then we're going to knit the last 2, knit the last 1. Right. Bottom. I have now knit all my stitches from my holder needle to my working needle. Huzzah. Now I need to do a swap. I need to take the stitches on my working needle and put them onto the cable. And the stitches that are on the cable on the left hand side, I'm now going to feed them onto my holding needle. Now this might be a bit fiddly because of this stitch that we pulled really, really tight, which was a good thing. You just got to twist and strangle it, but it will go on. It will go on. Bit of perseverance. Come on, Heather. Come on. Wiggle, wiggle. What also helps is if you do this. Just use your fingers and your nails to pull them apart to do the tension. I know my nails are just disgusting. I know. Every time I see them. Ugh. Right. Now again with this bit, we've got to make sure our stitches don't twist. We've got to make sure... See, look, I've got a gap there. But it will close, I promise. Got to make sure our stitches don't twist. So basically, we always want this lovely row, or this lovely caterpillar, we always want it to be back to back, like so. Okay, that's how we want it to be. We always want it to be back to back like so. That's how we want it to be. Okay, but now I'm going to pull the cable so I'm comfortable. Things are still a little bit smooshed, but as the work starts to go, it is going to get easier, I promise. But now I'm going to knit. I'm really holding on to it because it's so small. You'll hopefully have more stitches, so it'll be a bit easier. But I'm going to hold, no, I'm not, rewind, ring. I'm going to feed the needle through that first stitch, through the first stitch, not under, wrap the yarn around, and I'm going to continue my knitting. Now, here, where you've got your stitches where there's been a gap between the cable and the needle stitches, you can create what I call a little ladder, and it basically means that it's really obvious that they were, oh sorry, it went too far down. It basically means that it's just really obvious that they were apart. So you just want to give it a little bit of an extra tightness. You want to give it a bit of an extra tug. Ladders are completely normal, and when you go to block the work later on, they do tend to disappear, but you will always know it's there. No one else will though. It's just you. And I'm going to continue knitting to the end of the row. And when I get to the end of the row, I'm going to show you how to do a rib stitch, because that's how we're going to do the cuff or the collar. Cuff? I think it's called a cuff for our snood. There we go. Yes, I make it look easy because I've been doing this for years. You may have only just started. So be kind to yourself because this is hard. But it does get so much easier. Soon you'll be able to do this and watch telly. I even know people who can do this and read a book at the same time. I'm not that level. Just because I have to really concentrate to read anyway, let alone multitasking. There we go. Oh, so this one's a bit harder to pull, and it's because I've got, I went through the yarn itself. I don't think you can see that, but I went through the yarn, not through the stitch. I'm going to show you that again in a minute. I'm going to show you that at the end. Right, the last stitch is going to be really tricky. Look how tight it is. Oh my days. Oh my days. It's going to fall off. That's fine. Oh, it fell off. Not the end of the world at all. I'm just going to feed it back on my needle. Feed it back on my track. Sorry, I keep bringing it close to me out of absolute habit. I'm trying to get it through that arm. It's because it's so tight. But that's a good thing. We want it tight. Do you remember? We want it tight so that we don't get a massive gap. Ugh. Just gotta pull. That's as best as we're gonna do, and that's okay. I'm gonna have to bring it close to me. Sorry. Just needed my elbow to whoosh, really get that in there. And then knit the final stitch. But you will be glad to know that not all the beginning stitches will have to be this tight. It's just literally that first one. There we go. Excellent. So, now I'm going to do that lovely transfer again. So all my stitches that are on the cable are now going to go on my working needle. Squidge, squidge, squidge. Squidge, squidge, squidge. And then all the stitches that were on my working needle are now going to go on the cable. Okie dokie. So it's growing. It's very small, but it is growing. Look, we're getting somewhere. Now I'm actually going to show you how to do the rib stitch, but I'm just going to move my foot because my foot is really uncomfortable. That's better. Right, now I'm going to show you how to do the rib stitch. So the rib stitch is just 2 stitches. That's all it is. It's where we knit the first 2 stitches, and then we're going to purl the following 2 stitches. So I'm going to literally knit my first 2 stitches. So 1 and 2. Excellent. Looks awful, but I promise you as it grows it's going to get better. Now we're going to purl. Purling is the exact same as knitting, but it's kind of backwards. So I never actually stated this because I always forget. Your yarn when you're knitting is always at the back of your needle. It's always at the back of the needle. When we're purling, we bring it to the front of our needle, always to the front. And then when you knit, you put your needle through the middle. Oh, sorry. You go through the middle of your stitch, right? So your needle's going from the front to the back. Let me repeat that. That was dreadful. Your working needle is going from the front of the holder needle to the back of the holder needle. That was dreadful. I'm so sorry about that. But with purling, we're actually going to go from the back of the holder needle to the front. So it almost looks like we're going down diagonally. If I move my hands out of the way, there you go. So it almost looks like we're doing that, but we're not. We still keep them up at a normal space. But because our yarn is at the front, it means that we can easily wrap it round. So when I wrap it round, I'm going to go up and over that needle. And it's the exact same concept. We're now going to bring that needle through. And there's our new stitch. Kick the old one off. And that is a purl. And what this does is it changes the direction of our stitches. And as you continue ribbing, you're going to see the difference between a purl stitch and a knit stitch. So let's just do that again. I've got the yarn at the front of my needle, which I want. I'm going to take my working needle and I'm going to go from the back of the holding needle to the front through that stitch like so. So it's almost like we're going down diagonally, but we're not really. You don't have to go down. And then we're going to wrap the yarn going above and over. I'm so sorry, because the way the action is, you can't help but block. So I'm going to try and do it like this. Try and do it this way. So we go up and over. Ha ha ha, there you go. Purling is actually a little bit easier to bring the yarn back through because of the way that you're holding it. It's automatically pulling this way. So when you bring the needle back, it's there pretty much straight away. And then we kick off the old stitch. There we go. So now if I show you, you can see the difference between a knit and a purl, because the knit stitches are these lovely V's, whereas the purl are these bumps. So you've got V's and you've got bars or bumps. And then we're going to knit 2 more stitches. And then we're going to purl 2 more stitches. So again, I forgot to say, because it was so automatic. When you knit, your yarn goes at the back of your needle, always at the back. When you purl, we bring it to the front. So again, bring it to the front, still holding it in between my fingers. That's never changed. And I'm going to bring the, this time I'm not actually going to do it the most obvious way. I'm going to bring the working needle from the back of the holding needle to the front, like so. And then I've only got 1 bar, look. Still only got that 1 bar. I'm going to wrap the yarn around, and I'm going to pull it through. I'm going to kick the old one off. So again, from the back to the front, wrap that yarn around, and then pull it through, kick the old one off. Now I'm going to move my yarn from the front of the needle to the back to continue my 2 knit stitches. So then I'm going to knit 2 stitches. Excellent. I'm now going to purl. I'm going to bring it to the front, and I'm going to go from the back of the working needle to the front of the working needle, just through 1 stitch, through, not under. So I've still only got 1 bar. Wrap the yarn around, pull it through, another purl, wrap it around, bring the yarn back to do your knitting. There we go. Now, got to remember, we ended on a knit stitch. We ended on a knit stitch. Our caterpillar is growing. We're now going to take the stitches that are on the cable and we're going to put them on the holder needle. And this is going to get so much easier now. See, look at that. No struggle there. And then we're going to take the stitches that were on the working needle and we're going to put them on the cable. At this point as well, you shouldn't have to worry about twisting because it will be less likely to happen. Now, teaching moment. I forgot what stitch I ended on. I didn't really. But say I did. Say I just forgot. I was too busy focusing. I forgot what stitch I ended on. Look at the way your yarn naturally hangs. If your yarn is naturally hanging at the back of the stitch, the back of your working needle, it means that you did a knit stitch. If the yarn is naturally dangling at the front, it means you ended on a purl. So that's how you can recognize what stitch you last ended on. Look at where the yarn is naturally going, and this one is naturally going to the back. So I want to do purls, so I'm going to bring it to the front, pull the cable a little bit, and I'm going to purl these first 2 stitches. And remember, because this is where we're going to have a little bit of a ladder, I'm just going to pull them a little bit more. See how that difference is? Pull them a little bit more so there's a little bit of a tighter tension. Purl, fell off. I've caught it, it's all right. And then at the back of the needle to knit. So I keep going too low. just getting my arms better. There we go. And knit 2. Bring to the front and purl 2. Bring to the back, knit 2. When I say bring to the back, I'm talking about the yarn. Bring the yarn to the front, purl 2. Bring the yarn to the back, knit 2. Bring the yarn to the front, purl 2. Oh, and now my favourite part. Bring the yarn to the back. This stitch should not exist. Now, you might think that you can count, right? Until you knit. When you learn to knit, you can't count. There'll always be an extra stitch, and it's going to annoy you, and that's fine. I've got an extra stitch. Grr. I'm not going to panic, though, because what I'm going to do is I'm just going to knit that random extra stitch and my first stitch. I'm going to knit those 2 together. And I'm going to show you. Right, I'm going to do another swapperoo. So we now want our stitches on our holding needle, like so. So much easier. They look how easy they just. They're not going to do it now, are they? They just glide. Look at that. See, it's just the first one that's just grrr. Okay, and then working needles go on the cable. So I said I had that extra stitch. No worries. I'm just going to knit these 2 together. See that? So I've gone through both of those stitches. So I'm going to knit them together to remove that extra. Oh dear. To remove that extra little stitch, because we don't want that extra little stitch there. Right. And then I'm going to pull, because remember, bridge the gap, pull, and knit, bring to the front to purl. Right. I'm going to finish this row, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like so far. Purl, bring to the back for knitting. Sort your hands out, Heather, because you're dropping them. Honestly, you should see how I'm sat. It's so awkward. Bring to the front to purl. Look, there's my purl. See the bump? See the bump? That's a purl. See the V's? That's a knit. So that's also a way to tell if you can't remember what you ended on. Look at what you've got to do next. If it's a bar, it's a purl. If it's a V, it's a knit. So, purl, take the yarn to the back and knit, bring the yarn to the front and purl, bring the yarn to the back and knit. Ah. Right, let's have a little look. And I've only done a round and a half. Oh, so I keep saying rounds. I've not told you what they mean. When we're doing circular knitting, instead of saying rows, we say rounds, because you are literally knitting a circle. So here we go. So I've only done a round and a half. Technically, I've done 2 rounds and a half. But this is what... Come here, working yarn. You're being all right, pickle. Tail end. This is what my work looks like so far. Okay. Got my lovely rib going on. There you go. You can see it growing. Hello, rib. Purl, knit, bar, V, bar, V. Excellent. Okay, cool. Now I will stop there because I don't want to keep boring you, and I know you just want to get going. But the one thing I'm going to also say, when you knit around, the work that is on the inside. So remember, we're knitting a circle, right? The work that you see on the inside, this is your right side row. So the work you see on the inside is your right side row. The work that you see on the outside, so if you were to hold your needles, it's the work that's facing you, this will be your wrong side row. And I'm going to show you with a finished snood what I mean. So when I was knitting my snood, when it was on my needles, it looked like this. So as I was knitting, all the work that was on the inside of the circle is my right side row. Everything that's on the outside of this circle is the wrong side row. So right side, wrong side, right side, wrong side. And we know this because with the rib, it doesn't really matter but it's when you come to actually knit the body of your snood. We're going to be doing just the knit stitch. That's it, just the knit stitch. No purling, just knit stitch. Because as you're doing the knit stitch, you never need to change the direction of your stitches, unlike when you're knitting with 2 singular needles. So it creates the stockinette stitch instantly, which is just the best thing in the world. And if you don't know what that means, a stockinette stitch is where you have the knit stitch on one side and then the purl on the other. So that's how you can better differentiate between the right side and the wrong side. Because most patterns, you want the knit stitch to be the right side because people think it looks a bit nicer or whatever. But when you're knitting in the round, you only need to do the knit stitch. It's glorious. It's just the best thing. But I just wanted to end with that to just say that's how you can identify the right and the wrong side row when you're knitting in the round. And then when you finish, you cast off. I do have a video for that. You cast off, and then you know how I said about your gap? So this is where I had my that gap. This is where my tail yarn was. Now, you honestly, like, I'm not being funny, but if you didn't know, I honestly don't think you would actually be able to tell. The only reason I desperately know is I made an error here. And I know that's where the tail was. So that's the only reason I was really, really able to see it. But if you didn't know it was there, you wouldn't know. You wouldn't know. And if you're going, I know, well, good for you. But I don't think you would. I don't think you would. But there you go. That's how you knit in the round. That's how you cast on those stitches. That's how you knit in the round. And that is also how you purl to create a rib stitch. I really, really hope you found that useful. I know this was a long one, but I really, really hope you found that useful. This is confusing, okay? So if you've never ever knit at all, I would highly suggest trying to find yourself a pair of single needles and giving like flat knitting a go. And like I said, flat knitting is where you knit something is, oh, hold on, I can show you. So they say this square, for example, purple again, not planning this. Say this square is going to be a glasses case for a mouse. What I would need to do is I would need to fold it in half, and I would need to sew the edges to create my tube, right? That's flat knitting, because when you knit your piece, it's in one flat shape that you then have to fold and sew up those seams. Whereas in the round, you don't do that, okay? So that's the difference between flat knitting and circular knitting. So if you've never ever knit before in your life and you're finding this a bit too tricky, I would highly recommend doing some flat knitting first. Knit with 2 single needles and then come back to this. Just because it's not because the process is difficult, it's the holding and then the transferring. It's that bit that's tricky. Everything else is absolutely fine, but it's just the fiddliness of it because of the cable. But anyway, I will stop there. I really hope you found that useful, and as per usual, happy knitting.